The head of Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards, she is hitting the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton. No big shock there. But our Andrew Whitman caught up with her in Stanford this morning, go over a host of issues, not just the politics, but also the policy of abortion as it relates to today's day and age.
Ms. Richards, you're supporting Hillary Clinton in the primary campaign. Why Hillary? Why not Bernie Sanders?
Hillary Clinton, for her entire life and her entire public career, has been such a champion for women and families. She has fought for equal pay. She's fought for better access to health care. She has such experience, and she's going to be an incredible president.
You know, we talk to a lot of Democratic voters, a lot of progressive voters, and if you ask them what their key issues are in this campaign, you can go through a long list before you get to reproductive rights, which seems like it's a bit of a change from recent campaigns. Have you noticed that? Does that concern you, and how do you change that momentum?
Well, actually, I found just the opposite. In fact, what I'm seeing, I've been now in 16 states volunteering for Hillary, and what I see is crowds everywhere, very animated, very concerned, particularly about the Republican presidential candidates, the fact that they have pledged to not only end access to safe and legal abortion, but also end access to Planned Parenthood, which is one of the largest providers of women's health care in the country. I think these issues are going to be determinative, not only in the primary, but in November. We've seen already an enormous gender gap, and I think we'll see an even bigger one when we get to the general election.
So much of the pushback against reproductive rights, against Planned Parenthood in recent years has been on the state level. Does the national campaign impact your pushback on the state level, and does it distract focus away from the state-by-state rollbacks we've seen?
Well, having a president and a Congress that supports women's health is incredibly important because it does impact what happens at the state level. And the Obama administration has been such a strong supporter of not only Planned Parenthood, but women's access to health care. We now have 55 million women in this country that have access to birth control through their insurance plan because of the Affordable Care Act. These are the kind of advances we want to build on, and that is actually what Hillary is promising, is to take this 8 years of progress we've made and now go even further.
The Republican candidates, there's been almost universal pushback against Planned Parenthood and against reproductive rights, and yet the frontrunner, Donald Trump, has actually said some positive things about Planned Parenthood. Does that surprise you, and how do you take that message and try to expand beyond just Democrats?
Well, I think what he recognized in some of those statements is that Planned Parenthood is an incredibly important healthcare provider to 1 in 5 women in America who've come to us for healthcare. And there is an enormous amount of support among people of all parties. We have so many Republicans that are coming to us as patients. They work at our health centers. They sit on our boards. And at least for Planned Parenthood, I can't wait until the day in which partisan politics is no longer trying to get in between women and their access to healthcare in America.
How critical is the opening on the Supreme Court when it comes to the fight for reproductive rights, and does that change after a new president is inaugurated, assuming that Judge Garland is not appointed?
It's critical to have 9 members on the court, and we feel very strongly that President Obama was elected for 4 years, not 3 years. He's put forward a nominee. The Senate should be considering that nominee. The stakes at the Supreme Court are very high. I do think it's going to be an issue that people are going to consider when they go to vote in November.
What's your biggest focus right now when it comes to the push for reproductive rights, maybe that people at home aren't necessarily thinking about?
I think the most important thing is making sure that people go and vote and that they know the stands of folks running for president in particular, but all up and down the ballot. I know Senator Blumenthal is running for re-election here in the state of Connecticut. He's been an incredible champion for women's health and rights. I do think that this could be a watershed election in which we really make a decision as a country to move forward again on access for women and families to health care. That is going to be what's at stake in November, and our job at Planned Parenthood and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund is to make sure everyone is informed and goes to the polls.
Do you think that can be a determining issue in the general election come November?
I absolutely do. We're already seeing it. Planned Parenthood, we are now have 8.5 million supporters in this country. That's twice the membership of the NRA. Folks realize that their ability to plan their families has an enormous impact on their ability to finish school, to get a job, have a career, and support their children.
And finally, there's been some question about division within the Democratic Party, obviously in the middle of a primary process. Women's health and reproductive rights, is that an area where the party can come together, and are you sensing that it will come together, particularly on those issues?
I think the stakes are going to be so high in November that people will come together. The thought that someone like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or even John Kasich, who have pledged to get rid of Planned Parenthood access, they want to overturn access to safe and legal abortion. That's not where the American people are. I think these will be determinative issues, and I think folks will come together to elect Hillary Clinton. She's the most qualified candidate running, and she'll be an excellent president.
So no big surprise there, Planned Parenthood in support of Hillary Clinton. But this next piece of news on the campaign trail, surprising at least to me, Donald Trump, he's making big news again over the subject of abortion. And again, he's at odds with his own party. The GOP, it calls for no exceptions allowing an abortion. But take a listen to the Donald.
Every 4 years has a provision that states that the right of the unborn child shall not be infringed, and it makes no exceptions for rape, for incest, for the life of the mother. Would you want to change the Republican platform to include the exceptions that you have?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Absolutely, for the 3 exceptions.
All right, that's a major diversion from policy. Let's bring in our panel to get into it. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Republican strategist Bill O'Reilly, and Scott Vanderhoff, former 5-term Republican Rockland County exec and co-chairman, Palisades Institute of Dominican College. All right, guys, it is newsworthy. And again, for the 3 exceptions for the folks who don't remember at home: rape, incest, and when the life of the mother is endangered if she delivers the child. To that end, I can say, Bill, he's with the majority of America, with the exceptions, but he's certainly at odds not just with the other 2 Republicans running for president right now, but with the party platform. Good or bad move by the Donald?
I think this is potentially really interesting. In that, and I may be completely off base here, but between that and other comments he's made on transgender bathrooms, et cetera, I think Donald Trump and his people may be making a very bold tactical move and conceding that they're not going to get a good chunk of the Republican electorate. I think maybe, and I may be completely off base, they might be going after Bernie Sanders supporters and beginning a tactic on that to get the anti-Hillary forces somewhere in the middle to the left to go in there as a bigger populist movement. It seems to, Paul Manafort has really put the campaign onto solid ground. It's suddenly strategic. Trump is suddenly being cautious with his comments, and in both of these, there was no hesitation. I think they may be writing off conservatives.
You seem ready for the question and ready for the answer,
very
Scott.
much so.
Paul Manafort, for folks who don't recognize the name, he's the new campaign manager, brought on a couple of weeks ago to help with the delegate wrangling and math, and then now he's been elevated to run the campaign and certainly messaging under that. But I look at this as one of 2 ways for him, in that he's been such an untraditional candidate from the beginning, putting it politely, that in some bizarre way, he gets immunity, unlike any other candidate, if he takes positions on Medicaid, if he takes positions on the transgender the bill was referencing. For folks who didn't hear, he said, yeah, Caitlyn Jenner can use my bathroom. Certainly at odds with what we've seen in North Carolina, Mississippi, and again, the Republican platform on transgender rights. If somebody else said that, they'd be called a fraud, but he gets to change his position all the time, and somehow it doesn't stick.
Yeah, you're right. But he has no core policy views. I mean, the reason the conservatives...
But is that almost a positive at this point?
I think so. And the reasons the conservatives can't stand him is because he has no conservative views. He never has. And he's even admitted several times, well, I change. Now, he was for this before he was against it. Now he's for it. I mean, he's done this on several different occasions. So this is not a surprise. And I think Bill is absolutely correct. He is now moving towards the general election. What he said before, he can change because, as you point out, he's Teflon. I mean, they just like that he just says it. Okay, so now he's switching on this major issue, and he'll keep talking about this while conservatives are pulling their hair out saying, but that's not what you said 8 months ago.
You'd say conservatives, and I know you're right, but Republicans, which aren't always the same thing, or maybe somewhat conservative, but not arch conservative. Do you think most Republicans, because I've seen polling on this, it's a little bit complicated, that most Republicans are saying, listen, I'm pro-life, but I think that there's a distinction with a difference if a woman's raped, or my God, if there's incest, or I don't want to, force a woman to die on the operating table. Is his position more consistent with mainstream Republicans than it's not?
It is, and consistent with Roe v. Wade. And most Republicans will tell you, look, we can't change that United States Supreme Court. But there are other issues, late-term abortions, all those issues that become very, very important to Republicans, I think, across the board. So when you deal with the core Republicans, I think, especially on this, they give the conservatives a bone by putting this into the platform. It is not something that I think is widely pushed across the country. People don't like abortions. We understand that. I mean, but the idea that this is a win or lose proposition, I don't think it is for most Republicans. They don't focus on it. They're focused on the economy, on jobs, on international relations, and what have you.
You know, Dominic, we're going to get into next segment some really interesting statements that the aforementioned Paul Manafort said about who Trump is now and who he will be if he's the nominee in a general election. But on the subject of abortion, it almost depends not so much on the candidate, but just the window. It's become less and less of a dominant campaign issue. But when it gets brought up, I think people are sometimes surprised who wins and loses on the issue. Could Donald Trump, with his views and statements on women, right, actually take the subject of abortion and be seen as, not a, Neanderthal and everything else? I mean, you can take a position on abortion that's, if not progressive, at least moderate, but you can't erase all the other stuff he said about women, right?
Well, the county exec and Bill also, but the county exec is dead on. Richard, the only people that care about the party platform are a few hardcore folks, and the media tries to hang it over the candidate's neck. And on either side, they run as far away oftentimes with the controversial aspects of the platform as possible. When you said, quote, bone for the conservatives, that's all this is. End of story. Trump cannot win with that type of position. And it's not, you mentioned he doesn't have core views, but he's more, at least based on his past comments, more pro-choice than not. And so he's pivoting, as one would expect, for the general election. And this is why I'm saying don't write this guy off. He's not as crazy as a fox as you think he is.
Well, meaning,
when I say you, I mean everybody.
One question, is he pivoting too early? Maybe not, but maybe. There's still Indiana. I mean, I think he does well on Tuesday, but there's still Indiana out there and California, and you've got some social conservatives in both states.
But what's interesting to me, Bill, we'll get into this, is I thought after New York that this new, he had brevity, and he wasn't as aggressive in New York after a huge night for him. But then 24 hours later, he was right after Lion, Ted, and the rest. And I was the only guy at the table saying, are we sure that's a good play? Everyone said, absolutely. It's worked for him to this point. Yeah. All right, we take a break here. But on the other side, is this just an act? Is Donald Trump just playing a role, the role of an unhinged guy running for president who nobody, including he, knows what's going to come out of his mouth next? Or is he really onto a strategy here that will change once he leaves Cleveland? His own campaign manager says that's what's going on.